I found a very scary article. The downsides of immigration. Let's read and see what risks this holds for us. So let's start from the beginning. Most immigrants have to start building their careers either from scratch or from a lower level than they once had back home. This means that at first, your earnings may also not be at the level you would like them to be. Let me tell you how. Back when I was still in Russia, I opened my own office. I had some small savings that I managed to put together while working several jobs. In other words, my workload was insane. I decided I needed to move forward somehow. I had this clear understanding that if you do nothing, then trouble not only does it exist, but it will always be there. You have to do something. At that moment, I understood that I needed to start my own business. I decided to get into immigration matters. I only had enough money to open the office and keep it running for a couple of months. So it was either going to work out or not. I basically spent all my money, quit my job, and left, you could say, for nowhere at all. As many people told me, I could end up with nothing, no job, no savings. It was completely unclear what I would do. Probably starve. Nevertheless, I went for it. It could have failed, but I succeeded. That's it. So everyone decides for themselves. Do we start from scratch or do we cling to this miserable salary, like 230 euros, which most people hold on to, afraid to lose it? Language. If you are not a native speaker of the language of the country you are moving to, you are initially at a disadvantage compared to the locals. That's true, that's just how it is. But the vast majority of Russians earn significantly more than the local population in Montenegro. So, knowing the language is not everything. There's also your qualifications, your drive, your willingness to really dig in with everything you've got to secure a good standard of living. At a minimum, Russians living here earn twice as much as the local population. That's the bare minimum. Most earn much more significant amounts. Finding your first job. The most difficult part in the early stages of adapting to a new country is finding your first qualified job. Getting a simple job in the service sector in cafes, bars, restaurants, hotels, or as a laborer on construction sites is usually not very difficult. But the earnings from such jobs are relatively low. To find a qualified job, you need to be better than other applicants. And here the ability to present yourself becomes an important factor. I don't argue with that. Indeed, there are currently quite a lot of unskilled jobs in Montenegro. It is possible to find a qualified job, and there are such examples among Russians. But of course, it is much more difficult. In fact, not everyone may even succeed at this. Problems with housing? After successfully finding a job, you will almost certainly want to get your own place to live. By the way, it's interesting that people of not all nationalities are as obsessed with the desire to have their own home as we are. But that's just an interesting fact. So often when searching for information about a particular country, you rely on data about the standard of living of the local population, and you forget the fact that it will be harder for you. After all, how do locals buy housing? Their parents help them, either directly with housing or with money, or by using their own property as collateral, so they don't need to save up for the first deposit. As a result, a local resident enters the real estate market quite early. In your case, most likely, you will spend a significant amount of money on the immigration process itself. And even if you owned property in your home country, that money is unlikely to be enough for an apartment or house in a decent city in a decent country. Here, it's true decent housing in a decent country isn't that cheap. Although, if we're talking specifically about Montenegro, housing in Montenegro is cheaper than in Russian comparable locations, for example, in Sochi. Everyday problems. Another seemingly minor factor that people forget to consider is the everyday challenges of settling in. And here, I'm not even talking about the usual stress of finding new housing in a new country. This is a bit different. After living for many years in your hometown, you accumulate contacts throughout your life, and your parents did the same before you. The faucet broke, Uncle Vasya will fix it. Need to get your car inspected? Go to a shot? Well, yes, I won't read any further here. The point here is clear. Everyday problems really do exist. Something broke, you don't know where to get it fixed, but all these issues are resolved pretty quickly. After a year, you'll already know all of this. Mentality. I hope you all know that you shouldn't impose your own rules on someone else's home. If you want to emigrate to another country but bring along a lot of your relatives and loved ones, the heart of your prejudices, it's going to be extremely difficult for you. The system will reject you, and you'll feel like nothing is right and everything is off. Well, you can't really argue with that. Even in countries with a mentality relatively close to ours, countries like Montenegro or Serbia, the mentality is still a bit different. But when it comes to Western Europe or America, I think it goes without saying. You have to adapt. Testing relationships. If you move with your family or partner, your relationship will almost certainly face serious challenges due to the stress of relocation. I don't know how a person talks about stress. For me, the stress disappeared after I moved to Montenegro. Homesickness. So there's also a very large section here about how you'll miss your homeland. I'm not even going to read it because I've only experienced homesickness here once or twice. But I have heard from people that they miss their homeland, literally once or twice. No one that is the overwhelming majority, like 99.9%, 99 hundredths of a percent of immigrants do not feel homesick. The whining community, as I mentioned earlier in some of my articles, some people have a tendency to complain and generate negativity. And very few generally positive people have the desire or time to share their joys on the internet. They live in the real world. But negative people respond in their own way here. They go all out. That's why Russian-speaking immigrant groups in different countries, as well as many bloggers and video bloggers, quite often emit a negative vibe. But you can't argue with that. It really does exist. I'm not sure this is a downside of immigration, but it's just a phenomenon that really does occur. Moreover, this happens in every country. If you read something about America, you'll definitely come across complaints that something is bad there. If you read about Montenegro, everything is supposedly bad there too. No matter what country people live in, there will always be some whining immigrants. It's not that they're the overwhelming majority, but you do encounter a certain number of such complainers. In Montenegro in particular as well. It's a general stress. Immigration is always stressful, no matter what. A new environment, new people. You have to learn, communicate, look for a job, find housing, organize a business. You need to figure out where to buy furniture, where to send your children, and so on and so forth. You go through a lot of nerve-wracking challenges the whole time. Some people manage, some break down, and for some the country just isn't a good fit. I believe there's nothing shameful about going back home if life was better there than in the new place. Well, basically, if someone wants to return, all you can do is wish them luck. But from my personal observations, very few immigrants actually go back home. Goodbye, everyone.